Chapters 15 through 19 of An American Robinson Crusoe. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Allison Hester of Athens, Georgia. An American Robinson Crusoe by Samuel B. Allison. Chapter 15. Robinson's Shoes and Parasol. The next morning Robinson could not get up. His feet were swollen and sore in consequence of walking without shoes over thorns and stones. He must remain the whole day in his cave. Before him, in the sun, his walking stick stuck in the ground. He thought how he had been troubled yesterday to find his way and about the shadow. He had now time to study it. He watched it the whole day through. In the morning it pointed toward the land, in the evening toward the sea. This comes from the daily movement of the sun. He determined to study the matter more carefully. Robinson got up and with great effort walked to the spring. There he cooled his burning feet and gathered some large leaves which he bound on them. He decided to remain in his cave a few days, for he had enough food stored up to last him some length of time. He planned how he might make himself a pair of shoes. As soon as his feet were well, he sought out some thick bark and put fastenings of tough, strong fiber on it. These served very well to protect his feet. But he must have some further protection from the sun. It beamed so hot that his hat was not enough. He made a parasol out of leaves like his hat. He took a straight stick for a handle. He tied some reeds together and bent them into a hoop. He then fastened the upper end of the stick in the center of the hoop by means of 6 reeds which formed the ribs of the parasol. To keep out the sun, he covered this framework with large, broad leaves. With a cord, he tied the stem ends of the leaves to the stick just above where the reeds were tied. Spread out, these broad leaves completely covered the ribs. Their tips reached over the hoop. They were fastened together by means of a small, needle-like fish bones Robinson had found on the beach. End of chapter 15. Robinson's Shoes and Parasol. Chapter 16. Getting Fire. Now Robinson had heard that savages take 2 dry pieces of wood and rub them so long on each other that at length they began to burn. He tried it. The sweat ran down his cheeks, but every time the wood was about to catch fire, his strength would give out, and he was obliged to rest, and when he began again, the wood was cold. "How will it be in winter," he cried, "when it is cold and I have no fire?" He must try other ways of preparing meat for his table. He must think of some other way of getting fire. He remembered that once, when a boy at home, he had in playing with a stick made it hot by twirling it on the end of a piece of wood. "I will try this," he thought. He searched for a good hard stick and a piece of wood upon which to turn or twirl it with his hands. Having found the best materials at hand, he began to twirl the stick. He made a little hollow in the block of wood in which to turn his upright stick. There was heat, but no fire. He twirled and twirled, but he could not get the wood hot enough to blaze up or ignite. He had not skill. Besides, his hands were not used to such rough treatment. Soon they blistered, and this method had to be given up. "I must have fire," he still thought, and recalled the sparks that flew from the stone pavements of the streets when the iron shoes of the horses struck them as they slipped and strained at their cruel loads. "Why may I not get fire by striking together 2 stones?" He sought out 2 hard stones and with great diligence kept striking them together until his strength gave out, and he was obliged again to acknowledge failure. He remembered that sometimes travelers put the meat underneath the saddle and ride on it until it is soft. He tried it with pounding. He laid some of the meat on a flat stone and pounded it. It became quite soft and tasted very well. He then tried hanging it in the sun and finally wrapped it in leaves and buried it for a few hours in the hot sand. Chapter 16. Getting Fire. Chapter 17. Robinson Makes Some Furniture. One thing troubled Robinson very much. He could not sit comfortably while eating. He had neither chair nor table. He wished to make them, but that was a big job. He had no saw, no hammer, no auger, and no nails. Robinson could not, therefore, make a table of wood. Not far from his cave he had seen a smooth, flat stone. "Ay," thought he, "perhaps I can make me a table out of stone." He picked out the best stone and built up 4 columns as high as a table, and on these he laid his large flat stone. It looked like a table, sure enough, but there were rough places and hollows in it. He wanted it smooth. He took clay and filled up the holes and smoothed it off. When the clay dried, the surface was smooth and hard. Robinson covered it with leaves and decked it with flowers till it was quite beautiful. When the table was done, Robinson began on a chair. He made it also of stone. It had no back. It looked like a bench. It was uncomfortable to sit on. Robinson covered it with moss. Then it was an easy seat. Table and chair were now ready. Robinson could not move them from one corner to another, nor when he sat on the chair could he put his feet under the table, and yet he thought them excellent pieces of furniture. Every day Robinson went hunting and shot a rabbit, but the meat would not keep. At home they would have put it in the cellar. If only he had a cellar! He saw near his cave a hole in the rock. He dug it out a little with his mussel shell and found that it led back under a rock. From much bending over and digging, Robinson's back, unused to severe toil, ached wretchedly. He decided to make a spade. With his flint he bored 4 holes in a great round mussel shell. They formed a rectangle as long as a little finger and as wide. Through these holes he drew coconut fiber and bound the shell to a handle fast and strong. With his spade he dug a hole so deep that he could stand in it upright. Then he put a couple of shelves made of flat stones. In this cellar he put his rabbit meat and his eggs. Then he laid branches over it and finally covered the whole with leaves. Chapter 17. Robinson Makes Some Furniture. Chapter 18. Robinson Becomes a Shepherd. With his bow and arrow, Robinson went hunting every day. The rabbits soon learned to know him and let themselves seldom be seen. As soon as they saw him, they took alarm. They became timid and shy. One day Robinson went out as usual to shoot rabbits. He found none, but as he came to a great rock, he heard from behind a new sound, one he had not heard before in the island. Baa! It sounded. A kid, thought Robinson, like that with which I have so often played at home. He slipped noiselessly around the rock, and behold, really there stood a kid. He tried to call it, but the kid sought safety in flight. He hastened after it. Then he noticed that it was lame in one forefoot. It ran into some brush, where Robinson seized it by the horns and held it fast. How Robinson rejoiced! He stroked it and fondled it. Then he thought, how could it come into this wilderness on this lonesome island? Has your ship been cast upon the rocks too and been broken to pieces? You dear thing, you shall be my comrade. He seized the goat by the legs, and no matter how it kicked, carried it to his cave. Then he fetched quickly a coconut shell full of water and washed and bathed the goat's wounded leg. A stone had rolled down